Hi everybody, welcome to another tutorial on Continua from AudioDamage. In this video I would like to expand on the explanation of the FM controls which are located here under the oscillator number 1. So let's first of all start to decrease a little bit the volume, the output volume, so you can hear better my voice against the synth. So today we're talking about FM synthesis, so frequency modulation. What you have here is two oscillator, number 2 and number 3, which are used in turn to modulate another oscillator. So in this case, oscillator number 2 modulate the frequency of oscillator number 1, and oscillator number 3 modulates the frequency of oscillator number 2. Hence why it is called frequency modulation. It's different from amplitude modulation. I'm not going to explain the basics of frequency modulation. There are enough tutorials on YouTube and lots of articles on the web. But if you need a tutorial, just let me know in the comments. So, as I said, 3 oscillators, 2 modulated 1, 3 modulated 2. So effectively you have 2 modulators, oscillator 2 and 3, and a carrier, which is oscillator number 1 in frequency in FM terminology. Now let's start with a default preset, as I just loaded Continua, which sounds like this. Okay, as you know, if we disable both filter, you don't have any outputs going out from that oscillator. So let's disable filter 1 and on both oscillator 3 and oscillator number 2. And the reason is that we want to hear the output from oscillator number 1, which will be modulated by number 2 and so on and so forth. Also, let's set the waveform for both oscillator 2 and 3 to be a sine wave. So let's position it here right to the center, actually right to the left hand side, so we can use more the warp and skew. And if I press a key on the keyboard, you can see it's changed to a sine wave. So let's do the same for oscillator number 2. Okay, now what you hear is the sawtooth waveform from oscillator number 1 only. Let's also enable filter number 2, which will go in parallel as well, because as you will see in a future tutorial, we have 2 filters, filter 1 and filter 2 there. Okay, again, let's start with a shape of a sine, like so. Let's put it to the left. As you've seen from the previous tutorial, if you watched it, these will enable the intensity, maximum intensity for the warp and skew options. Right, so this is what it sounds like, oscillator number 1. There's a bit of click on the attack, so let's move this slightly to the right to remove that clicking, okay, on the attack. Right. Okay, so these knobs here for both for oscillator number 2 and number 3 allows you to change the intensity which or the amplitude that oscillator number 2 in this case uses to modulate from a frequency perspective oscillator number 1, the same for oscillator number 3. So I will play some notes on the keyboard while I change the intensity of oscillator number 2 in terms of modulating oscillator number 1 from a frequency perspective, of course. As you can hear, the sound gets brighter. Let's go to maximum. Of course, you can use the transpose function on oscillator number 2 to transpose, for example, up and down. Let's go down an octave, search 12 semitones. And what will happen is the frequency will be lower, and therefore the frequency modulation on the carrier will be different, as the ratio of the two is different. Let's also go up an octave here. Let's add oscillator number 3. So this is an octave above oscillator number 2, and you can hear the additional harmonic which are being added from a frequency modulation. Therefore, it sounds like adding a tremolo to the sound. Let's transpose oscillator 3 up by an octave. Okay, let's remove oscillator number 3 and decrease oscillator number 2 to 0 as well in terms of frequency modulation. Now let's change the shape of oscillator number 2 waveform to be a square. Interesting sound already. Okay, let's do the same on the waveform of oscillator number 3. Let's go to a square. Okay, and let's increase the frequency. And again, let's see what happens, how the sound changes when we move to a saw waveform. Let's even make it more interesting. Let's act on a skew to make it more like a triangle wave shape. So you can have lots of fun with these. Let's also change the for each of the filter from 2-pole to 4 poles. Again, we see these in another tutorial, but listen to the difference already. And of course you can act on warp as well for each of the oscillator. As you can see, he's breaking the square wave as we have seen in the previous tutorial. It's like a mallet sound. And of course, although we haven't seen it yet in this series of tutorial, but you can add effects. So let's add a reverb. And also some magic with the delay. Of course, we can also at this stage, if we want to, remember this is a subtractive synthesis, but we can enable also one of the other 2 oscillators as output. Perhaps let's decrease the feedback a little bit and also the mixture. And so on and so forth. So you have a lot of possibility in terms of FM synthesis in Continua. It's not like and the famous DX7, so where you had only sine waves form, although you had 6 operators on that one. Here you have effectively 3, but you can use tons of functionality on each one. And remember, as we will see in a future tutorial, you can expand. For example, let's say that on insulator number 3, we'll double click, press the plus sign, and put a flexible floating point envelope generator, which we'll find under here. Let's increase the intensity. And also here, like so. You can see it's changing there. Let's sync it and also add a different point, like so. You can hear different effects on the envelope itself. Dun, dun, dun. And you can also decide to apply it to the oscillator number 2. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope I was clear on the explanations. If you have any question, please leave comments. And as always, see you next time. Bye.